that's nonsense, isn't it? So everything last week, you forget about. That's where we were, wasn't it, last week? Floor pans. Now, I promise you, this will be it. One last video about it, then we'll move on to something else, something more exciting. Well, it won't be that exciting when it's all old car stuff. But yeah, so we were looking at this, weren't we, last week? I was putting the swages in. Remember, we were putting these in and so on, and I was discussing how I was going to construct it. So we got to that point where we had the swages in, and we'd bent this one up, and we'd bent these sides up, and then I said I had to run a weld up them. So I've done that, and then done all the folds, you know, done all the technical bit, done all the edges and so on. And then I was saying I was going to let this piece in separately. I was then not happy. Do you remember this went off a bit, this went offline a bit. I wasn't very happy with the way that swage went. Okay, that's it. That went off a bit there. Not so happy with that one. So I had to go at correcting that, which worked to a degree, but I'm not very happy with it. So you know what I'm going to say, don't you? That's development. And that's the proper one. So yeah, I made another one. I got the swages in line. I finished the ends of the swages off as well, so we got a nice finish to them. And then I did some returns on it. So I did these returns on it here so we could spot weld it together. It's the same thing as that, just finessed. So let me get this one. There we go. So what I've done differently here, so I've made this as a separate part this time, and then we've spot welded it through here. But that ends up with the flange on the bottom here, which is okay, I don't mind that. But what I've done with this one is I actually folded them over and then let a little triangular piece in, because you can't get enough metal, you know, because that's when you cut that like that and then fold it, it goes like that. So I let a piece in there, but that meant we've got a nice roll on here, you know, so these sort of roll over a bit rather than having this sort of edge here, which is fine, but I just thought that might be a bit more like the original. So it's the same thing, but neater, and I feel a better version of it, which is what it is, you know, and this is what it takes, a bit of development sometimes. But do you remember, I was on about these brackets, wasn't I? And I was saying I was going to have to juggle this up underneath and then try and fold them over and so on. And anyway, I looked into that and I just thought that's nonsense, isn't it? So everything last week, you forget about, and we start again, which is what you have to do sometimes. But not quite. But anyway, right, let's go and have a look on the car and see how it fits. So I use this one just because this I don't mind bashing this one around. I don't want to keep bashing that in and out. Right, let's go and have a look. Let's go next door. Just like that. Done. Now, that wouldn't have happened with them brackets on, would it? So you can see what I've done, I cut them off. So there we are. So what I did is I decided if I cut these off and make these big enough, I can run a weld round here to get this floor pan to sit in here nicely, and then I can put these back on and run the welds round them. They weren't welded on very well, as we know. It was good enough, but it wasn't that. So it wasn't all that really. Not that finessed, but it's stick welded, as we said, so that's sort of the way it is. And to be honest, for the stick welding, they do a very neat job. So they obviously got good at it. That's that. So that's the way to do that. So all these ideas of trying to freddle it round and everything else, it just isn't going to work, is it? So I thought I've got to, you know, bite the bullet and actually do it this way. So that's that. So I'm quite pleased with that. Front, rear. Then I've got to do the same that side. We'll have similar issues with taking the brackets off, although there's not so many brackets there, and obviously got to do repairs first. So, as I said before, isn't it? Just like Ginger. Everything Fred does, but backwards and in high heels. Or a bit different to backwards, it's opposite and it's smaller. It's a bit different, but yeah, you get the picture. Let's move on to some other stuff. So I've been cleaning this up. I'm going to get this nice and clean. we get some paint in here before it's all enclosed. And then what I've been doing is some bits on the end here. A bit of old mig there, get rid of that. Right, so what I've been doing here, I've let a little end in there just to sort of finish that off. So let's have a look. Right, so let that in there, and that was that. So that piece was on there like that. So I took that out, and then we've got a new piece in there. Then this is this tube that the electrics go through, that the battery cable and so on goes through there. So I've put that back in where it needs to go. And then I've also, when that was on there, to finish the outer, where it finishes, the outer seals go on there, you sort of have a sort of splash guard, effectively to fill this bit up. That goes on there like that. So I've got the datum of where the weld was to give me reference, and this will go on later on when I'm putting the outer seals on, you know, because I want to get it in just the right place. But yeah, so that's that. So I've made a new one of them. So there you go, there's one closing panel for there. As I say, this won't go on just yet, but there you go, that's one of them. So I made those with the returns and so on. So that's that bit. I've marked it with a chassis number and, you know, where it come from, so I know for future, but you can see why we're doing it. Yeah. So yeah, this has got a bit of rust in it, hasn't it? And then where it joins here, it was all rusty. So actually that's quite good, behind the metal's quite good, but I didn't want that there, so that's why I've replaced that. And you can see there, I can line it back up with what's left of the weld on there, so I know. So I've got a datum, so I can work back with that. So that's that one. And then let's have a look at what's been going around the back here. So that's that lot. And then if we go into here, into this area, at the back of the sill, we've been doing similar work. So what we've got here is this lot would go on here like this. That. So I've unpicked this and I've made new. So it's exactly the same. It does the same job, but on the back of the sill. But you can see it had sort of holes in it and so on. And you see how peppered it is. And again with this, when this lot's on there, you have another little closing panel goes in there like that. So I've done exactly the same. I've made one of those, which is that. So I've made one of those, but before I fit that, I wanted to deal with this. So what I did, before taking this off, make sure we got it all lined up, I made a little cardboard template just to give me something to work to. So I got me, you know, got it sorted out. That's that line where that join is and so on. And then from there, I worked backwards and made a couple of little repairs, you know, a couple of little panels that we're going to let in. So I'm going to let that one's going to go in there, and that's going to go in there. This is how they are. This flange goes over it. Well, that disappeared when I took it apart. So that'll go on there like that. And then it will sit the same. You see how that sits like that? Sits back there where it doesn't quite line up. Well, that's the way it is. Look, that's how it was. So I'll repeat that because we'll have that the same as it is. And that'll go in there. And another little weird thing is this. You see this line through here? Well, that is where that edge is welded onto there. You can see on here. Yeah, and then I've just put a mark on there with some pencil just to see where it goes. So yeah, there's a weld there where that piece and then that welds together. So that begs the question, you know, what am I going to do about that? You can see the welds. We'll have a look at, you know, get some close-ups of this. But yeah. So what I'm going to do, I think, originally I thought that was like a sort of marking from the swage or something like that, and I was just going to put a little mark through it on the swage, but I think what I'll do is I'll just cut this off, and then I'll gas weld it back together again like they did, and then it's as it is, you know, so that's a silly little thing that I want to do. So that'll all go together like that, won't it? And then our little closer will go in there, something like that, won't it? And that's that. Something like that. And then in here, got a little bit of grotty stuff here, a little bit of, you know, where the rust has got in it. So I've just made a little piece up in there. I'm going to let that in there. And then the underside of this is a bit peppered, so I think I'll cut the under of this off and let a piece in. I don't want to let a whole new box in. I don't think it's necessary, and it's quite complicated where it goes. So I think if I just take the bottom off there, let a piece in, and then we can actually start fitting our outer sills on. So we'll get some, real progress soon, won't we? Which I think is, oh, there you go, the lights run out. So, yeah, that was it. So I thought that was quite good. So that's it, that's our little update. And before I sign off, I can't really sort of go without just saying something about Jeff Beck, really, because it's only 2 days ago, although we all watched this a week later, it's only 2 days ago, the sad news that Jeff Beck passed away, which was sudden, which I was quite sort of taken, quite affected by that, more affected than I thought I would be, really. I didn't really know him, but he was local, you see. So he lived in East Sussex, in a village very near here, and obviously his guitar stuff, he's a legend and everything else and all this stuff, the Yardbirds and all this stuff. But it's his hot rod stuff, his old cars, that's really sort of affected me in my life. And I didn't really, you get a bit introspective, don't you, when things like this happen, and you suddenly think, and I thought, it sort of occurred to me how pivotal he's been and his old cars have been to my life. Now, as I said, I only ever met him once and chatted to him once about his Corvette, I think it was at that time. But anyway, but a lot of people I know and friends of mine knew him reasonably well and so on. So I'd sort of hear about him and so on, and you'd see him out in his hot rods driving around, or his Corvettes and things, and even the bands I used to follow back in the day, the band we used to go to the pubs to see, you used to sometimes go and watch them. So it's only thinking about it, thinking, well, actually, if it wasn't for him living in that little village and driving these old cars about, that inspired a whole generation of people that I know that were sort of a little bit older than me, so I sort of was inspired by them to get into this stuff. Not Italian cars, I hasten to add. This was more, the American stuff that I used to, and hot rods that I used to be more into. That's where I sort of got into the first things of getting into cars was that. I was already way on the road and to being obsessed with cars as a child, long before any of this. But as I became a teenager and got really into it, it was those lads and so on and that whole thing. So you suddenly think, if he hadn't have been there, I wonder, would they have all done these things they did? And of course, he was instrumental in setting up the sort of, or bringing the hot rod thing to the UK, because he had these cars long before anyone else did. I think the Ali Pali was one of the few cars that was displayed there in the very early days of the custom car world and so on. So he was doing this in the 60s when no one else was. I mean, obviously everyone was over the pond in America. That's where it all come from. But yeah, that was quite something. So it's only, looking at that and thinking about it, I thought, well, it's sort of, it's a big effect on me, and on these people around me, because not from him, it's from them that I got into it. But would they, they were inspired by him. So that was quite a thing. So yeah, that's quite a shock. And yeah, so well, think of his family, and and there it is. But yeah, I was. I'm sure loads of people are wobbling on about things like this, and it's a bit mawkish to go on about it, and I'm by no means trying to sort of pull in, some celebrity off the back of it. Of course not. It's just about him, and about that, and as I say, introspective. Maybe I spend too much time in the workshop thinking too much. But anyway, there you go. You that know me, there's a few that friends of mine that watch this, and they'll know exactly what I'm on about. And the rest of you might not even know who he is. So look him up. There's some great YouTube things about him. There's his music and his cars. And there's a really good film he did a few years ago about him and his life and his cars. So look it up and see. And if I'm preaching to the converted, then you know what I mean anyway. So that's that. On that sad note, I'll say good night. Celebration if you look it up and see what he's done. It's not a sad note if it brings him to. No, that's the wrong word, isn't it? if people didn't know about him, now find out about him, that's something, isn't it? Sometimes that happens with an artist, although he was pretty well known already. Good night.